just for professionals.
There we go. Another chance to the left side. The Yankees are champions of baseball.
Still power, not just for professionals.
All right. Like I said, this is kind of new for us to do. I guess Kip has been getting a few requests for active shooter preparedness, and so they kind of asked me to put this together. I actually did this for one city, so I just had to rework it a little bit. But this, of course, is becoming a problem. Of course, I'm Billy Carter. I was actually with Choctaw Police Department for about 30 years. Last 13 years I was there, I was the chief, and then OMAG picked me up for some foolish reason, but they did. So it's good to see a few old faces, and hopefully we'll get to meet some others later. But actually there was, I think UConn actually just put on a recent school that was about $600 to attend to train the trainer on active shooters. And I actually went to their webpage and read a statement off of their webpage that actually said there is no experts in active shooter situations. There's no expert that can tell you what to do, because every situation is going to be different, obviously. What we're going to do is tell you a few things that we did around here, because actually we've had to go on lockdown probably 3, maybe 4 times. We've locked the building down, and so we had to come up with a plan. So that's the first thing that I actually suggest that you do, is that you find a way to start looking at your building first. And I'm going to show you some pictures of a city that was actually involved in an actual shooting situation from inside their city hall. And we'll cover that in just a few minutes. But this is mostly what really happens, is you're either going to have employee violence, or you're going to have family violence, or you're going to have a hostile intruder or stranger violence. Now, the biggest problem with workplace violence is, I hate to say it, but we'll go through some statistics that will show you that most of it will relate probably to family violence when that occurs. But what we did here is, number one, we identified all of our exits, so we'd know which door we needed to go to, depending on where we heard the commotion going on. Whatever you do, don't waste time gathering personal effects. Get up and go, okay, if you have the chance. Or the other thing is remember that your life matters more than your purse. Okay, don't go after stuff that you don't need to go. Just go. That's about all you can do. And we'll get into that in a little more detail as we go. You should know where, like I said, where every egress is, because some people, maybe even visitors sometimes, only know that one door. Or a new employee only may know the one door that he comes in and out every day. One of the city halls that I visited, that I actually did this program for, had 5 entrances into the building, all unlocked doors. I could enter the building anywhere, and not a person could see me unless I went through the very main entrance. So I was like, this is nuts. I said, I can walk in here anywhere, and there's nobody to greet me, nobody to see me, and I can just walk through your building. I can even walk upstairs and visit admin if I wanted to, because there was nothing to stop them. So we had kind of went through there and identified some things with their building that they need to look at first. So what we also do here is we have a plan in place depending on what the situation is. Like if it's just a threat that may be coming over the phone, or maybe an employee has received a threat from a spouse, then we pass that word on to either our immediate supervisor or the next senior person in charge, and then we always go, we're supposed to meet in the boardroom to discuss some kind of plan. Luckily, when they built this building, they did think about security. It can be breached a little bit. We've tried to take care of a few things, which is once we evacuate the building, if we do wind up and are able to evacuate the building, you need to have a preset place where you're going to go, either another building for safety or maybe a parking lot that's a little further away, but you need to try to go to the same place because someone's got to have to be accountable of where you're at. Who's here and who's not. That's the main thing. And you should never leave the area without reporting your status to the incident commander, or at least your supervisor will report that to the incident commander, which is the person in charge, such as either a command post or whoever's rolled up, because they, once again, they're the ones that's going to be getting under the pressure about who's still in there and who's not. So someone's got to be responsible for taking a head count. We've got appointed people to do that. Half of us on this end of the building go out that door, and someone's responsible in that parking lot to take head count, and the other one's closer to the other end of the building, go out the north door. So those are our two doors that we're supposed to go out, unless we have to go out the back doors, which we do have back doors also. But the good thing is we can't get around in our building without fobs. Edmond Police Department actually chased two bad guys right into our lobby that were supposed to have been armed, and no one even knew it. I mean, it's just next thing you knew, there was 15 squad cars out front, and they were chasing two people through the lobby. That's all we knew, and there was supposed to have been a gun involved. And at that particular time, we didn't have glass windows. We didn't have the sliding windows. It was an open, so they could have actually probably pretty much gotten where they wanted to. We actually get a lot of threats from clients sometimes whenever we don't pay their bill, or they think we should have paid their bill, and we've actually had to go on lockdown strictly for that. And I hate to say it, but it's gotten so bad that there's actually only two of us here legally that can carry a gun inside the building. I being one, and Kevin McCullough, who's also a retired police officer. So we carry guns, and since we've had to go on lockdown 3 to 4 times, we now have bulletproof vests in our offices that we're supposed to wear, because they said you're going first. And I said, well, I didn't know you didn't like us that much, but I guess so. So employee violence. Let's talk about that first for just a little bit, because if you see someone that is mad, upset, throwing things, or is just getting out of hand, you need to pass that on, no doubt. You think back to some of the shootings that the employees have actually been involved in. The biggest one I ever think of is the Edmond shooting. There's a guy that was slowly going off the deep end, and then he finally did. And that was probably the first mass shooting that I ever remember back when I was a police officer. Does anybody know when the very first school shooting started? How long school shootings been going on?
University of Texas.
Michigan, like 1947.
First school shooting occurred in the 1800s, and have been occurring ever since. So the deal is we just didn't know about them because of what? Media and news. Our biggest problem right now is media and news. But actually, school shootings have been going on since the 1800s, and you'll see a huge jump in the 60s and 70s. It stayed real even throughout the 1900s, and then you get into the 1960s and 70s, and you see a huge bar increase when the shooting started, and then that almost doubled in the 80s and 90s. That almost doubled. So where did it all come from? Don't know. Me and my wife actually had a long discussion about that, trying to figure out, is that when social media started? Is that when TVs come out and you had more access to TVs? We don't know. Don't really know what causes the school shootings or what caused the sudden huge increase. But it was interesting to know that the first one was in 1800s, and they've been happening ever since. So shootings are going to occur all the time. But if you're around a mad employee who's pitching a fit, throwing things, getting angry, cussing, I would at least pass that on to a supervisor. All right, let them deal with it. That's number one. If you have to, just leave the area that they're in. Try to notify other employees by either your paging system, or you maybe slowly, word of mouth, might stay away till we get this figured out. Once again, once we've done, I'm not going to read every single one of these because you have it in your handouts. But the main thing is don't, you got to say something. Every one of us have probably been in a situation before where we had an employee that was going through a divorce situation. That's going to be a lot where that's not the actually employee violence part, but domestics are the worst.
Sadness and unanswered questions after a workplace fight leaves one person dead and another in the hospital. Thanks for joining us. I'm Paul Folger.
I'm Jessica Shambach. An attack inside the Vaughn Foods warehouse and more. That is near Northeast 12th and Eastern. And just moments ago, we got our first look at the man accused of the attack. Let me show you Alton Nolan's mugshot. This is from a previous arrest, and he has a criminal history.
We have team coverage of this breaking story. KOCO's Morgan Chesky is at OU Med, where one of the victims is being treated. Wendell Edwards talked to those inside, but we begin with Dave Detling. Dave, what can you tell us at this hour?
Well, Paul, Jess, like you said, police have identified that stabbing suspect as 30-year-old Alton Nolan. Let me step out of the way. Behind me, you can see that maroon Tahoe. That is what police say the stabbing suspect drove to this production warehouse and then allegedly went inside, stabbing two women. Now, earlier today, this entire ordeal lasting 2 hours. A lot of people wondering who the two women were and are wondering if they are a mother, sister, daughter, or wife.
Sorry for the family, sorry for their loss, and I hope the other girl gets better because nobody deserved to be in that situation like that.
It's a situation that started before 4:30 at Vaughn Foods in Moore. Inside this food distribution center is where police say an employee armed with a knife attacked his co-workers.
For whatever reason, the male became angry, entered the business, and apparently these are the first people he came in contact with.
One woman died at the scene, another taken to the hospital in critical condition.
It is not a domestic, no. He is not related to the victims whatsoever.
Investigators call the stabbing an extreme case of workplace violence. Violence that ended when an off-duty Oklahoma County Sheriff's deputy working security for Vaughn Foods left the building, grabbed a rifle, returned, and shot the stabbing suspect multiple times. When police arrived, building employees were moved to safe locations. Outside, family members watched and waited as sweeps were done in and outside the building.
Once we started determining who witnessed the incident and who didn't, we allowed the employees who have absolutely nothing to do with the incident to go home.
And police have not identified the two women involved in this stabbing. Again, a very active scene here at Vaughn's Foods. Again, they are collecting evidence on that suspect's vehicle. Live and more, Dave Detling, KOCO 5 News.
Now, as we know, they probably actually did know who the two victims were inside. Obviously, they're not going to release that yet until family's notified or contacted or something. So that's the reason police do not give out a lot of information, for reasons just like that. So, but that's that's an employee incident. It's actually a very recent one. There's been another one in Norman here recently where they actually attacked the guy, got his gun away from him themselves, and shot him with his own gun. So that's a pretty bad part. But here's a short little video when we start getting into family violence. Okay, I ran across this information just the other day that there's been a majority of mass shootings in the United States are all related to domestic or family violence. Okay, organizers define mass shootings as someone who shot 4 or more people. Now, the interesting part is that there's been 156 mass shootings between 2009 and 2016, and 54% of those were tied to domestic violence. And out of those domestic violence shootings, 422 were killed and 181 children were killed because of domestic violence. Now, it's not saying that all that occurred in a workplace, but there's been a lot of it occurred in a workplace. The worst time to watch, obviously, is at the point of separation. Someone's going to leave someone, and that's usually when it can go to pot. And the reason I threw that in there is because if someone's going to break up or they're going to do a separation, where's the easiest place to find them? Home or work. And so that's why we have a lot of domestic involved shootings at work. I've told people in other situations that I've taught in before is, look, there's two things that I found in law enforcement that people did not like to talk about very much. And one of those is sex crimes, and one of those is domestics. For some reasons, those were just the things you never talked about. Well, look at the figures. Someone needs to talk about it. You know somebody within your department or your working area or someone that you're close to that's having problems, you need to find a way to either talk to them or have them talk to a supervisor, especially if things appear to be getting worse. That way, if there is a threat or the spouse calls the office, makes some threats, those need to be reported then, not wait to see if he shows up. And that's why we went on lockdown a couple of times, because we had a client that was actually writing us and calling us with some pretty severe threats. We didn't wait. I mean, after the call, as soon as the phone call came in, and this guy was probably 45, 50 miles away from us, but we didn't wait because we didn't know if he was down the street or where he was at, so we locked down immediately. We're fortunate enough that we can lock the front door electronically and only open it for who we want to. So that's a good thing, and that's what we did. We locked the building down, and we did it for like 2 days, I believe, just to make sure things calmed down. But get those things reported. Talk to somebody about it. Talk to the person that may be having the issue or the family violence issue, because if someone comes in and tells you, I'm getting a divorce, there's your statistics. 50 to 75% of the shootings that occur is during the separation period. Okay? Basically, family violence is the threat or attempted or actual conduct of a family member or an acquaintance of the employee that causes or is likely to cause physical injury at the office or work-related site. We actually practice drills here. I suggest you do that. We're going to go through in a minute. I'm going to show you some actual footage of City Hall, like I said, that involved an actual pretty bad incident. And luckily, the guy's agenda was the agenda could have been a lot worse. Let's put it that way. But once again, you're going to see this on several of these. If you have these kind of problems, either get to an employee or, get to a supervisor as soon as you can. That there has been either a threat or something made from the family. Ensure that all exits and areas of building are secure. Once again, notify the police, obviously. And like I've got boardroom in ours because that's where we're supposed to meet and discuss a security plan if we get a threat that's not actively in the building. So these are called-in threats during family violence situations. If in our case, there's several of us that travel quite a bit, so that's why we've got in there that if possible, if you've got out-of-office employees, if you have a way to get a hold of them, tell them to stay away from the office. Don't come to the office. If you've got field workers that are out there and that normally come in and out of the PD or come in and out of the City Hall, if you have a way to get a hold of them, call them and just tell them to stay away until things are straightened out. That's what we do. I've been in the field several times and gotten emails that were on lockdown several times, so I don't report to the building. And once it happens, you want to coordinate all information with the police, because they're going to need to know a lot of information, and you need to be able to have documented or be able to have someone that can keep the police totally apprised of what's going on. They may not have to do anything. Like I said, it may just be a threat, but I don't take those kind of chances, and luckily OMAG does not take those chances here. If you have an emergency signal, I suggest you come up with one if you don't, or a way of paging the entire building that there's an emergency, or come up with something that maybe the bad guy won't understand, something simple. We actually finally redid our entry windows to, I don't think it's actually bulletproof glass, but it is bulletproof resistant, which means it's going to stop a few rounds. Here at OMAG, we also, once we looked at our building, what we did is identified where the safest places to go were. That door next door to the reception area used to be total glass. So we removed it, put in a hardcore door, because it's going to take longer to kick it or to pry it open. But we looked at little things like that. All I got to do is shoot the glass out, and I've got access to the entire building at that point. So we got rid of the glass doors. We identified offices. Here at OMAG, unfortunately, there's no doors on anybody's offices except for the directors, and they all have locks on them. So, and actually these happen to be in all four corners of the building. So that's where we're told to go. If we can't get out of the building, we're instructed to go to a specific place, lock down, and be quiet, and try to just, hopefully he doesn't recognize that you're in there. The only bad part about our building is there's a lot of glass on the outside. So even if we're in one of those corner buildings, if the shooter decides to go outside, it's a little more dangerous, but that's still better. I mean, that's more than likely not going to happen. If you're having a mass shooting or someone who shows up and does a lot of shooting, it's going to be inside the building more than likely, unless there's more than one, which is not that common. Of course, contact the police. Like I said, determine that they may assist. If they may assist the affected employee, if the situation necessitates. If you have to, have them leave. You can leave the office. Employees should seek shelter at a nearby facility. The town that I was in, that we did this at, they actually had some more buildings that the city owned that was across the street, and that's kind of the plan that we came up with them. Is if you have to exit the building, go there. That way everybody knows where you're at. Once you get to the parking lot and someone accounts for you, then get into a safer building or get to a different building at least. Don't stay in your building if you can keep from helping.
Our other top story tonight, it was a chaotic situation in the sleepy town of Fairfax after police say a man kills his wife on a crowded street in front of City Hall. The disturbing killing forced officers to open fire on the suspected shooter. Tonight, 2 people are dead and a community is left in shock while they try to make sense of this tragedy. 2 Works For You reporter Darcy Jackson has been following this from the beginning. And Darcy, what do we know about the victims?
Yeah, deputies have just identified the couple as Kenny and Teresa Robertson. They say Teresa had just recently filed for divorce and had a protective order against Kenny. Folks around here say it's a tragic ending for a woman who meant so much to Fairfax.
There were no answers. Nobody knew, really what to do.
A typical Thursday morning at the shop interrupted for James Early when he heard yelling outside his door.
And I ran from here up there to see what was going on. Well, they already had her on her back, was already giving her CPR, and they had the mask on her face.
There, Early saw his business neighbor and friend laying on the ground covered in blood. Even gunfire didn't stop people from helping.
There were shots fired, and we could hear the shots. And that one lady, she worked, diligently hard to get her going,
Deputies say it was her husband who fired the fatal shot from a high-powered rifle. While police responded to the call, another came out, where he was spotted heading to City Hall with rifle in hand.
There was 2 shots fired from the doorway of City Hall, and then he went out and approached the officers, and as he raised the gun, then officers returned fire.
He was rushed to the hospital, but the chaos was unheard by those helping his wife.
And I opened the front door and looked in there, and I said, well, what's the situation? She said she's gone.
Her husband later died at the hospital. Family friends say she tried to make her troubled marriage work. Her husband had a violent temper for several years. She leaves behind several children.
And the kids, everybody was just livid about the kids.
And a legacy at Fairfax Flowers that will live on in this small town.
Everything's going to be okay. Just by the grace of God, it's got to work.
And there you can see the flower shop now. It is closed right now, but we have heard that her children worked there with her. There's no word on what the future of that shop will be. Meanwhile, a lot of the businesses here in downtown Fairfax closed today out of respect for the victim and the investigation. In Fairfax, Darcy Jackson, 2 Works for You.
Okay, so why did I put that in there? The reason I put that in there was 2 reasons. One, it was domestic violence. It was domestic related. There had relationship that was not well for many years, as I was told. I was actually on my way to Tulsa, Oklahoma, when I got diverted to go straight to the Fairfax shooting. I'm surprised I wasn't in the back of that video somewhere down at the end of the street, because I made it there pretty quick, because I knew that we had 2 people shot, and the attorneys diverted me that way because it involved the city hall. Now, here we go again. We've had a rough marriage. She finally wants out. He actually got served the VPO the week prior. The interesting part of that was that I understand was she was actually living in a shelter somewhere else, but she still went to work every day. So where did he find her at? At work. Luckily, his agenda was, like I said earlier, could have been much different, because I can tell you about 5 people who could have been shot and killed immediately. Because whenever he showed up at her work, literally about 5 minutes after 8 in the morning, there was actually 2 people in the shop with her. He ordered them out, and when they ordered him, as soon as they left the building, he shot her. So he could have shot the 2 in the building with her, and he did shoot her. She stumbled to the sidewalk. She died there on Main Street. And then he literally just went the back way, literally a catty-cornered walk to City Hall, and walked in there, and now he's got 3 hostages. He's got 2 female hostages and a male hostage inside. Now, what the good thing is this guy's agenda was only his wife. And a little bit later it changed. But so he could have shot the 2 people in the floor store, and he could have shot the 3 people in City Hall. And he probably got a little angry once, because I'll show you some pictures. He actually went down to City Hall. That's the front of City Hall. Police department's just to the left of City Hall. And so it's right on the corner of an alleyway. But when you walk into their building, this is what you see. That's the front counter. No door, no nothing. I just walk right in if I want to. This is a very small entryway, but that's what you see in that building. How many doors do you see to get out of that area right there? 1. So if I've got a gun and I'm standing in this spot right here, right when I walk in, and everyone runs that way, where do I have to point my bullets to? Just the doorway. I'm going to get them. So we had a long talk about that. Their city was not, at the time, was that excited about trying to put money into fixing that problem. With just some probably easily minor fixes. The only good thing about this is that one of the ladies knew the gentleman very well. The whole town did, actually. They've been there for her whole life. But there was a lady sitting right here in this chair who was trying to text, because what he did is he came into City Hall and he demanded to see he wanted the police chief. Police chief was actually off duty. He thought it was a joke, because they have an employee there that joked with him all the time, because the message was, just get to the PD and do not tell him why he's coming. Just tell him to come down here. We still haven't figured that part out, why he wanted just the police chief. What they believe is that they felt that the police chief would actually take the shot, because he knew all the other officers in town. So being a friend, he didn't know if they'd take the shot. So basically now we're looking at suicide by cop. But he's got 3 city employees in this building at this point. One of them, the male employee, was actually his brother. His estranged brother, actually, hadn't talked in years. So we have an estranged brother in there. Luckily, he actually told them, I'm not going to hurt anybody, till he caught this girl right here trying to text the chief that he had a gun. And he saw it, and he made her stop and put all the phones away. So very, very close. Huge open area. It's just one big room. There's no place to go. And so, you got to go somewhere. So we talk really, I don't know if they've improved this area or not. This is what it looks like looking to the left. He actually took 2 shots from inside the City Hall by opening the door once the chief got there. The chief was parked across the street in an alleyway facing City Hall, and he took cover behind his car. So the guy fires 2 rounds from inside the building, out the door, at the chief, and then he just starts walking towards the chief. And that's when he was actually shot on Main Street. Okay? So if you have a stranger, an intruder, it's going to be almost the same thing in the event or a known or identified client that makes a telephone or written threat towards anybody in the workplace. It should be reported to your supervisor immediately. Okay? They don't have to be on the scene. So like I said, we had threats from miles away, but we went on lockdown immediately. So always make sure. I'm going to speed through some of this because it's pretty much the same thing. You know, if you have exits, know where they're at. It's like the old, a lot of people in here don't remember, who remembers Richard Pryor? Richard Pryor joke. I actually looked that one up last night that had to do with him going deer hunting. And basically they're sneaking through the woods and they're crackling through the limbs, and finally Richard Pryor turns around and says, "Where's the gun?" And the guy said, he said, "Well, Richard says, "I gave you the gun back at the car." And the other guy says, "Well, I didn't know you wanted me to carry it because it wasn't my gun." And so he goes, "Anyway, it's just a deer." And he said, "No, there's a bear behind you." And he said, so the other guy goes, "Well, which way are you going to run?" And that's pretty much what it's about. Which way are you going to run? You got to know where you're going to run, or you're going to have to lock down. We're going to get into that. Most of this is about the same. They're running me short on time. Actually, just got a few minutes left. So I'm going to try to get to a small video that actually sums up the whole thing. This pretty much says the same things. If you can secure in place, that's fine. You know, turn off lights, close blinds, that whole persona that we pretty much know what to do. But the bottom line to the whole PowerPoint is that right there. That's your only choices. You're limited. If the shooting starts, you're limited. You can run if you can. You can hide and barricade and fight, or you can play dead. And the only time playing dead's going to actually probably work is if he's already been in that room and you have to lay next to another body. It sounds terrible, but if they think I've been shot along with them, there's a good chance he's going to keep moving because he's looking for a body count. He's not just looking and stopping and making sure. He's looking for body count. So that's really all you've got there. I'm going to try to get partway through this video real quick. This kind of sums up the whole thing. This is going to show a few mistakes and some things that were done right. And it's actually a reenactment.
What you see in this opening footage is that these people in the reception area really didn't have a chance. As in most public businesses, the building is open to the public. There's no package inspection. There's no criteria for entry. It's on a public street, and this could not have been prevented. What we see in these opening scenes here is a lot of assessment. There's different people in different parts of the building that may or may not have heard something. They're not sure that it's shots. Sounded like gunshots, maybe, and they're trying to decide what they're going to do. It is critical that people have a mental plan. Even if they don't receive formal training, they should rehearse in their own minds, what would they do in a situation like this? When in doubt, get out. And if they have rehearsed it in their minds, the exit paths they might take and what actions they're going to take, it's going to reduce the time period, that critical time period, within which they have to make that decision to get out and save themselves.
Right, and having that plan in place will just make it so that it will take less action for that to happen.
Exactly. Now, as it's frozen here, I see you have two people being very cautious about what they think they've heard, and one's not.
Right. Here's something that clearly should not be done. It was a reckless action to run towards the sound of the gunfire to try to get out. It may have been the only door that guy knew to get out of the building. He could be a visitor. He made a decision. It caused him to be at least injured, if not dead.
911, where's your emergency? Yeah, I think that there's so much shooting in this building.
Okay, this would be the starting point of when a police response is going to be initiated. There is a policeman on scene already, just lucky in that circumstance. Mm-hmm. They're going to ask where you're at, especially if you're calling from a cell phone. They're going to ask what's going on. Details are important. Getting as a brief, detailed description of what's going on is going to be vital to getting a proper police response quickly enough to save lives.
And the dispatcher may even ask the questions, what's a shooter look like, how many of them are there, what type of weapon was it, just some basic information that the police officers can be armed with when they go and respond.
So as the policeman that's already on scene, fortunately, he just happened to be there on a visit, he made a quick assessment. People fleeing out the building got some information. He's getting ready to go in. He's instructed his fiance to call 911, let them know what's going on, and also probably, if it were me, I would say let them know I'm in there, that there's a policeman in the building.
Yeah, and I think that modern day police tactical protocol is that they are going into that building as soon as possible. They're not waiting to secure a perimeter until the SWAT team gets there. That officer's going to go in and do what he can because seconds are vital. Now, clearly we see here a mistake made by this young lady who's coming back into the space to apparently retrieve something. Nothing is worth going back in for.
Absolutely. She's lost precious seconds to escape. This could be vital to her survival. Also, if you notice, there's a woman in the corner office there who has failed to respond at this point. She's disoriented. She doesn't have a plan or know how to respond to this.
Packing up, I'm leaving.
Packing up? It's weird. Relax.
I don't know. I think this is something's not right.
We need to figure out what that was. And let's just all stay calm and we'll go figure out what it is. Okay, let's just stay together.
There's a guy in the lobby with a gun. We need to get out of here. There's a gun?
I think what you see here is the decision-making process is pretty obvious at this point. This executive comes into the space and says, there's a guy in the lobby with a gun, we need to leave. And two of the folks do so. He stays behind to try to convince this gal who's made a very poor decision to stay and try to capture some video with her camera.
He does an excellent job to come in and save other people's lives, and he did a good job with that. He will abandon the effort to save her when he sees another person flee across the windows there, and that's the right thing to do. He made every effort to try to save her.
What we see here in the training room shot is the people are doing one of two things. They clearly don't have an exit, and we're going to assume this is an interior space that doesn't have a window that they can either climb out or break to get out. Even on a second floor they could do that. But they're doing two things. They're arming themselves with a chair or whatever item they can for perhaps the fight for their life, and the others are getting behind the heaviest piece of furniture they can to afford themselves some cover, with the exception of one person who's still just frozen and not doing anything, and the others should be trying to convince her to get down behind that cover with them.
Maybe it was just fireworks. Well, I don't know. Well, Tom's on the phone. Maybe he'll find out. Are people leaving? I don't know. Are people...
Everybody get out. He's coming up this way.
At this point, there's been several indications that there's a real problem in that building and people need to get out. There have been gunshots. There have been people fleeing. There's even a man running down the hallway saying, come on, we have to get out of here. He's coming this way.
Okay, I'm getting pushed a little bit for time here. So you get the gist. That covered just about everything we're talking about, which is either barricade yourself in the best you can and stay hidden, turn off lights, shut windows, barricade down. You know, if you have to change doors in certain areas, I mean, the city that I went to, which I won't mention, but we looked at where's the whole front area was nothing but secretarials and the reception and a huge window. And the problem is they all had to run one direction. So if I'm there with a rifle, I just pick them off as they run. But we've actually found a center room right in the middle of where they were at, a center room. I said, change the door from a hollow core door, put on a metal door, put 2 or 3 deadbolt locks on it. I mean, minor changes, but there was a place for them to go and lock down if they couldn't get out the building. They had no back door exit where they were at. I said, put in a door. That's a little more work, a little more expensive, but put in a door where you can get out of the building, because this guy had free access to the building and mostly through that big window. So These are 4 of the 4 classes on Local GovU that deal with the same thing. Like I said, they're free courses. Anyone can take them. You can get on there and scan and find any of those that you want. So I'm going to wrap this up because Kip keeps yelling in my ear. But this is my favorite guy that I love listening to occasionally.
We got married last Friday. My girl was right there beside me. Our friends were all gone. We were alone, side by side. We were so happily wed when she got ready for bed then. Her teeth and her hair she placed in a chair, side by side. One glass eye so tiny, one hearing aid so small. Then she took one leg off and placed on the chair by the wall. I stood there broken-hearted. Most of my girl had departed. I slept on the chair. There was more of her there. By side.